So good evening and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Obvious. And tonight we're on episode 28. Thanks for keep sending the questions and just bear in mind I'm not a practicing psychologist or psychotherapist. And so I teach the non-dual and mostly from either Advaita Vedanta or Upanishads or A Course in Miracles. And so my understanding is grounded in that theory, and that's where I teach from. Anyway, okay. So first question tonight, hi Lou, why do you blog and write all those posts on Facebook and obviously the YouTube videos? The reason I'm asking is I find myself writing daily, and I don't know why. What's the point of writing down our thoughts and contemplative ideas? After all, there's no meaning in a meaningless world. So surely everything I write is pointless and meaningless. Well, we're designed in a certain way, and we have different ways of expressing ourselves. Writing is one such way. Ultimately, nothing is pointless and meaningless if it's a way of expressing your joyous passion, the joyous passion within. The entire dream is pointless and meaningless. The entire universe is pointless and meaningless. But when we choose to return to being ourselves knowingly, when we choose to remember what we are and what God is, and that is our greatest heart's desire, then everything becomes a way in which we remember self, remember God. There's obviously many different types of writers, and primarily there's the writer who's introspective and writes their own contemplative thoughts, keeps a diary, for example, and it's a way that they converse with self, even though not always are they aware that they really we can only truly talk to self and God as one. And then there are those that write as a way to remember. I think I fall into that category. It's one of my passions is to write and blog every day, where I contemplate and allow understanding to flow through me, allow knowing and the presence of that all-encompassing presence, which I know is the presence of the divine, to flow through me and into my awareness. Of course, then you get other people that want to write a story, and they're storytellers, and very often there's wonderful meanings in stories. And then there are those that want to write a book to tell their story as if other people are really interested in what they have to say, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. The only time I find it to be meaningless and pointless is when people want to write a book to tell their life story, which is really just another way of seeking attention and crying for love. Look at me, look at what I've gone through, look how I've suffered. Let me tell my story of woe to the rest of the world. And yeah, I mean, sometimes they actually become bestsellers, but the whole thing is pretty pointless and meaningless. But if you're expressing yourself and it's a joyous way that you express yourself, then by all means write. And you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You don't have to explain anything to anyone ever, in actual fact. And so write from a joyous place, write from a pure passionate place. And ultimately, everything we do is a narrative communication. Everything's a narrative story. All our understandings, all our beliefs are narrative stories. If those that came before us didn't put down their thoughts, Edgar Allan Poe, Ramana Maharishi, Neem Karoli Baba, all these great teachers before us, then we wouldn't have a point to start off with. And since we are one collective whole, we are all adding to one another's deepening of knowing, deepening of understanding, which leads to transcendence. It's only through understanding that transcendence comes. And understanding what? Understanding that this is a dream, and it's through forgiveness of self and what appears as others that we transcend. So keep writing. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to have deeper meaning to it. Just let it be an expression of self. Hope that gives you some reason and purpose to continue writing. Don't stop. To me, it provides me with a huge amount of peaceful joy. Okay, next question. Dear Lou, the ego is continuously attacking me with thoughts of guilt and fear. How do I get rid of the ego? Now, to answer this question, we've got to take a step back and what is ego? And there are quite a few of my talks where I explain what the ego is. But we need to understand, I need to help you understand that the entire universe is the contents of our dreaming mind. Dreaming mind is ego mind. Awake mind, the unseen, the flow, the spark, the energy that animates all of us. The true essence of what we all are. That's right-mindedness. That's the Christ. That's the extension of God. What we see, what we can smell, taste, feel, hear with our senses, not real. That's the illusion. All of it's ego, the whole thing. It's expressing itself through space, time, and forms. Every physical being, every sentient being is a thought in form. Every single one of us started off as a thought in our dreaming mind. We are characters in our dreaming mind. There's no getting rid of the character. The character naturally and progressively awakens to its right-minded true reality, the absolute shared reality with God, and then has no more desire and lets its apparent body-mind apparition eventually gets put down, dies, and the essence of itself, pure spirit, returns to spirit, Christ mind. Remember this, and this isn't a judgment of any sort, but I want you to really realize when you have the sense of, I want to get rid of my thoughts, and so I want to get rid of my ego, what you're really wanting to do is you want to understand what is your thought and what is not. And the only real thought you have is a thought of silent stillness and unconditional love. That's the thought you have, which is the thought you are, pure awareness. Only ego wants to get rid of ego. Or should I say, only the ego, the dreaming mind, at some stage in its projections, wants to get rid of its alter egos. It's 8 billion alter egos on this planet alone. Yet we cannot get rid of something which doesn't exist. And therein lies the trick of the ego. We simply have to realize what is true, the essence, the essential nature of our true self, and what is not. People, places, things, and events appearing as reality. The essence of all of it is reality, but what appears is just a misperception. Ego is simply an erroneous idea you have about yourself, an identity. Or to put it more accurately, it's an erroneous idea that our collective dreaming mind has about what it is and what God is. And since it's fallen asleep, it cannot remember. The dreaming mind is the finite. It's the finite dreaming mind. God's source is the infinite. God's source is not aware of the contents of the finite dreaming mind, and the finite dreaming mind cannot access the full awareness of itself as the extension of God. There's glimpses, there's bridge consciousness, there's that bridge across forever, which is actually closer than close. The journey that we go on seems to be forever, but in actual fact, it's a tiny step inwards. But the true answer to getting rid of ego is really, look up in the Course in Miracles, text chapter 4, section 7, the rewards of God. It's all in there. I urge you, go and read that. Course in Miracles, chapter 7. Chapter 4, section 7, or verse 7, the rewards of God. It's in there. As I've said before, only ego wants to get rid of ego, or its alter egos. It either wants to elevate each little ego and make it grandiose, or it wants to destroy them. Why? Because it lives on through the sorrows of others. But you really cannot get rid of something that exists. You reach a realization where you know what is true and what is not. And once you know what is true, you no longer pay attention to what isn't. As I said, it's just a simply erroneous idea of what you have. When you hear those thoughts that shoot you down or try and raise guilt in you or try and make you feel unworthy, unwanted, unloved, not good enough, those are just the erroneous misperception the dreamer has about itself and therefore is playing it out through you, thereby keeping its thoughts trapped in form and time. Transcend this. By now, you should know that you shouldn't listen to a single thing you think, and you shouldn't listen to a single thing anyone seems to say. Go within, abide as often as you can, practice gratitude. Whenever anything comes up, find the source of the thought, investigate, look where it comes from, what triggers it, and you'll go back into your formative years. You'll see other patterns develop. And what did you ask for it? Did you trigger it in some way? From a spirit point of view, you incarnated in order to figure it out. But it's only because you've asked to be shown that you're figuring it out, not because you've incarnated. You're not awakening to self because you've asked and you think you know how. You're awakening to self because what God is. Because of what God is, you can't help but awaken to self. It's the natural progression for every single thought and form, and in actual fact, more realistically, for the dreaming mind. It will awaken to self and realize it but dreamt a dream that never happened in true reality. So don't try and get rid of the ego. Remember what you are. And in remembering what you are, the ego gently and gradually dissolves. There's still a purpose for ego while you're in physical form. It allows you to distinguish between right and wrong. It allows you to choose what's right and wrong for you. But at some stage, you'll put it down and you'll be guided fully by spirit. And spirit is spontaneous. It acts through you, for your greatest good, and for those around you. Don't try and get rid of ego, transcended through forgiveness and by realizing what you are. Hope that brings you clarity. Next one's a bit of a fun one. And I'm always amused when people send me emails like this. But here we go. Dear Lou, I'm considering doing a tantric sex workshop to elevate my soul progression. What are your thoughts about Tantra? Thanks for the question. If you have been following me for a while, you'll realize what I think about any physical discipline as a form to progress or advance your soul. One indivisible self, one soul. To me, Tantra or tantric sex is just a sick mantra. That's it. Tantra is a sick mantra. It's just a joke. It's again misperceived, misdirected miracle impulses by egos who have no idea what they are, what God is, and what the sexual impulse actually is. For most people, for most thoughts and forms, so let's start with you're simply a thought in your dreaming mind that has now appeared to take form, physicality, the universe. Sex or sexuality is really either a release of tension or a means to fulfill a sense of lack, a sense of emptiness, a sense of incompleteness, a sense of unworthiness, and a desire to be desired and to be wanted and to be contained. But it really, it stems from lack, and lack of what? Not knowing what you are. It's also a way that through the sex activity, the ego propagates itself by replicating body, mind, thought identities. And so expanding more versions of its mini-me's, its enemies. And also through the extension and expansion of the whole sex activity and procreation, the dreaming mind, our dreaming mind, keeps itself preoccupied with the activities of raising children and so forth and so forth. And then, of course, on the other side, it's all about maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, or avoiding being present. So you think you're present in the sexual activity. You're not. You're trapped in the activity And while you're trapped and focused on the activity, it seems like time stands still, but you've just preoccupied yourself with a misperceived miracle perception or miracle impulse. That's why no one ever feels permanently fulfilled after sexual activity. There may be an hour or two or a day where you feel so fulfilled, but the emptiness always returns and the desire arises again. And you'll find that, especially in the masculine, it needs to go and recharge to come back to desire again. The feminine can stay open to the receiving of the sexual energy or the attention or the intimacy much longer than the masculine. That's the way they're designed. It's where the saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Definitely a masculine saying. So the ego is very clever at misappropriating spiritual teaching in order to perpetuate and elevate itself. So it's come up with this invention. So, how do we make sexuality spiritual? And again, it's just a way of the ego through you, egoic dreaming mind, through its characters, you, releasing its tension, its guilt, its fear, and definitely its sense of lack and unworthiness by focusing on activities that maximize pleasure. Ego loves to indulge itself in whatever it thinks is going to elevate its characters and keep its characters trapped in the elevation of themselves, hero of the dreams. And so it loves to indulge in activities of pleasure in whichever form. And of course, sex and sexuality is typically one of them. And so again, it's just escapism. It's for the ego, it's just preoccupation with something else. How to become the world's greatest lover, how to please your partner, how to be the best intimate person there can be. It's always got to do with comparison and being pleased, or how about pleasing others and being evaluated as the world's greatest lover type of thing. And of course, if you can then spiritualize it, because once the ego has failed at making itself famous and notorious through business and worldly activities, and it fails at that, well, it then seeks the sort of the gentler parts. It wants to excel at spirituality. I've met a few of these so-called tantric sex teachers, and straight up, they are the most perverted sick people I've ever met. That's what they are. Misappropriating spiritual language. They're all generally quite intelligent, but sick and as perverted as it gets. So tantric workshops, stay away from that shit. Really, stay away from it. Tantra is very attractive to the ego, but it's really just a mask of spirituality stuck on a pervert, stuck on a psychosis of desperation and the need to be needed. And of course, it just becomes all sorts of levels, and before you know it, you've joined a cult. True sexuality and true intimacy, if it was expressed without any obstacles to peace, would just be unconditional love. There would be no need for physicality. There would be no need for penetration and orgasm and procreation. It would just be the extension of love. And if you were in the presence of someone who was completely unconditionally loving, you would feel loved. You would feel validated, seen, accepted, just as you are. But if you haven't transcended that desire and you still have a deep sense of lack that needs to be fulfilled, you could very easily fall in love with that person and misperceive it as a physical attraction. Unconditional love is the absence of space and time. Love is the absence of you and I. It's one indivisible self, the extension of source energy forever. What appears and disappears knows not of unconditional love. It gets glimpses. And then, as I said, the ego takes those glimpses and tries to misappropriate it. And before you know it, you're having tantric sex workshops. So remember that ego is in permanent resistance to what is. It's in resistance to its lack. It's in resistance to its desire. It's always looking for release in some way or another. It's always looking for some sort of fulfillment, some sort of validation, some sort of, it needs attention. And of course, it needs to be exalted. Everybody wants to be wanted. Everybody wants to be needed. And what do people do to be accepted, wanted, needed? How often do people compromise lifetimes after lifetimes and sit with the most terrible partners and the most horrible abuse just because they've been wanted once or twice, or the narcissistic lover pushes you away to pull you back, pushes you away to pull you back. It's the sex act all over again. Realize this, no one's ever going to transcend illusions by reading a book. No one's ever going to transcend illusions by any physical activity. If that was the case, it'd be millions of transcendent people, because thousands of people do yoga every day. You're not going to transcend self through tantric sex. It might be fun. Go ahead if you want to have fun. But don't bullshit yourself into believing a tantric sex workshop is spiritual. What's spiritual anyway? There's awareness and there's none. Okay, you're either aware or you're not aware. You're either aware of the I am as awareness and present moment awareness, or you're not. There's no such thing as not being aware. A non-spiritual person can be fully awake and fully aware, and a spiritual person can be fully asleep, trapped in idolatry and in mantras and sayings and non-dual language, read thousands of spiritual books and be completely asleep. You do not transcend your identity. You do not transcend your body-mind identity through books or physical practice. In A Course in Miracles, you're taught and given a very specific path. Forgive until there's nothing more to forgive. And what are you forgiving? Yourself for dreaming. And so everything that happened to you or appeared to happen to you, or whatever you fear, you realize the whole thing's a story. The whole thing's a lie. We love to call people out on their bullshit and on their lies, but we're lying to ourselves. As I've said before, we're all either internal or external narcissists. And the worst kind are the internal narcissists, because they beat themselves up, and yet on the outside, they look perfectly fine. The mind is awakening to self, and therefore the characters in the dream will gradually awaken to self too. No singular character awakens to self and is now enlightened. The whole mind is becoming enlightened. Characters can awaken to self, realize what is true and what isn't true, and lend their energy, lend their spirit to the awakened part of the dreaming mind, which then lights up even more and lends the light to the rest of its fractured selves. Once you've awoken to the true reality, you've had a glimpse into true absolute reality, your shared reality, God, to the essential nature of what you and God are, the eternal extension of love, energy, the desire for sex, sexuality is gone. Intimacy, yes, but intimacy as in into me I see, comes from the movie The Sex Guru. Into me I see, knowing self and all collective, all others are one indivisible self, the Christ, the extension of God. True intimacy is not a sexual activity. True intimacy is knowing self and being self, knowing we're one indivisible self. Everything is interconnected, interdependent on each other. One indivisible self, awakening to self. If you're still in form and you're in a relationship and you're awakening to self, and your partner still has a need for intimacy of a physical kind, you may very well respond and reciprocate. But the desire for bonking, or to just be flat out straightforward, for fucking and conquering and dominating and 69 shades of purple and all of that nonsense is gone. You have no need to feel sexy, and sexy is an egoic need for, look at me, getting attention. When you know self, there's a pure pouring out of self to the rest of yourselves. It's a deep, compassionate caring you have for the well-being of everybody who appears mental well-being, first and foremost, because, you know, it's one indivisible mind dreaming it up. It's not about the characters. It's about our one self dreaming. And if we can help our one self awaken to our Christ self, we end the world's problems. We dissolve the dream. We dissolve the universe. So what was once the need to gain fulfillment or feel complete, feel desire? Once awakening to self has taken place, all of that just fades. And the pouring of yourself lovingly and intimately with the rest of yourselves becomes the most natural way that you live, that you act, that you participate fully. You pour back in and you pour the love of God through yourself into the rest of yourself. No longer about sex and sexuality. So be very wary of these tantric things. Listen, if you want to just go and have fun and you enjoy sex, by all means go. I'm not judging you. But if you think you're going to be spiritually and more advanced because you've now learned some sort of Kama Sutra sexuality position and you're going to breathe through your Kundalini and out through your third eye and now it's going to transcend. People have been trying that for hundreds of thousands of years. It hasn't worked. Why is it going to work now? I can only share with you my direct experience. Go within, inquire as to what's craving it, what needs fulfillment, what feels unworthy, what feels lack. Go within you. When you're feeling that drive, when you need to go and fuck something or be fucked by someone. There it is, straight up. Inquire, what is that emptiness? Who's looking for that? And have you ever felt fulfilled after sex? Have you ever felt fulfilled after you fucked someone or got fucked by someone? Really? Did you? How long did it last? Do you feel like a man? Do you feel like a princess? And how long did it last? If it didn't work then, it's not going to work now. You're bigger than this. You're greater than this. You're wiser than this. Transcend this. Go within. Inquire. Face the urge. And very quickly you realize it comes from nothing. It doesn't actually exist. But what exists is you that has observed it. And now from that place of observation, abide, rest in God, offer gratitude, practice forgiveness if any obstacle comes up, and then pour back into your dream. But pour yourself lovingly into it. Be the light you've come here to find. You can do this. You're closer than close. You're there already. I hope this gives you some guidance.